She looked him dead in the eyes and said the words that cut straight through him. "I cannot marry a poor driver. Are you mad? Do you know who my father is? Get out of my face before I call security." Then she snatched the small bouquet of roses from his hand and threw it on the dirty compound floor. And with her expensive gym sneakers, she stepped on every single flower, crushed them slowly, deliberately, while her friends laughed and her parents stood and watched and said nothing. Those flowers had cost him 3 days of his salary. What Folashade Adekunle did not know, what nobody in that compound knew, was that the man standing in front of her in his cheap shirt and worn shoes was not who he said he was. The driver she had just humiliated, the poor man she had ground into the dirt in front of a crowd, was the only son of one of the most powerful men in Nigeria. And in exactly 7 days, her entire family was going to learn that truth in a way none of them would ever recover from. His name was Chinedu Akanwo, 29 years old, tall, quietly handsome, with the kind of steady eyes that always seemed to be thinking something through. He was the only son and heir of Chief Bartholomew Akanwo, chairman of Akanwo Holdings, one of the largest construction and oil servicing companies in the country. His father owned buildings in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. He owned ships. He owned land. The Akanwo name opened doors that other names couldn't even knock on. Chinedu had grown up with everything: private schools in Switzerland, university in London, a penthouse apartment, 3 cars before he turned 25, personal drivers, cooks, an assistant who managed his schedule. He had never once washed a plate, had never taken a bus, had never walked into a market by himself, and he was exhausted by all of it. Here's the thing about growing up wealthy in a country like Nigeria. People stop seeing you. They see the money. They see the name. Every girl Chinedu had ever dated knew his father's net worth before she knew his middle name. They laughed at his jokes that weren't funny. They agreed with everything he said. They dressed beautifully and smiled at the right moments and ordered carefully at restaurants. And every time he watched them, something deep inside him felt the hollowness of it. They weren't in love with him. They were in love with the name, the cars, the Dubai trips, the credit cards he handed over. The last one, a woman named Amelia, beautiful and sharp, he had caught on the phone one night, not knowing he was awake. She was talking to her friend, her voice relaxed and honest in the dark. "I don't even like the boy, but his father is loaded. Once I marry him, I'm set for life. I'll manage the face." Chinedu lay there on the ceiling with his eyes open, and something inside him died quietly in that moment. He ended it the next morning. Amelia cried, begged, threatened. He was already done, with her and with all of it. That weekend, he drove to his father's house in Ikoyi and sat across from the old man. Chief Bartholomew was 64 years old, sharp-eyed and gray-haired, the kind of man who could read a room and a person simultaneously. "Daddy," Chinedu said, "I want to do something and I need your support." "What do you want to do, my son?" "I want to disappear for 3 months. I want to go and live like an ordinary man. No money, no name, nothing. I want to find a woman who will love me for me, not for the money, not for the Akanwo name, for me." Chief Bartholomew laughed until his stomach shook. "Chinedu, are you well? Live like a poor man, you? My son who cannot open a sachet of water by himself?" "Daddy, I'm serious. I'm tired. I want a real woman. I want a real life. Just 3 months, please." The old man looked at his son for a long time. He saw the pain behind the request, genuine, bone-deep exhaustion. And he remembered something. He remembered what it felt like to be young and poor in the village before the money came. He remembered meeting Chinedu's mother, a woman who had loved him when he had absolutely nothing. He understood. "Okay," Chief Bartholomew said finally. 3 months. I will arrange it. You will work as a driver for a wealthy family. You will live in the boys' quarters. You will earn 50,000 naira a month and nothing else. No calls home, no credit cards, no safety net. If you are serious, prove it." Chinedu smiled. "Thank you, Daddy." What neither of them fully understood was that this small decision was about to walk him into a storm that would shake the foundations of two families. The family chief Bartholomew arranged was the Adekunles of Lekki. Mr. Adekunle was a senior executive at a major bank, wealthy, comfortable, well-connected. His wife was a fashion designer, and they had one daughter, one spoiled, sharp-tongued, breathtaking daughter named Folashade. Folashade Adekunle was 26 years old, light-skinned, tall, long-braided hair, eyes that were fully aware of their own effect. She drove a white Mercedes her father had given her for her birthday. She worked, on paper, as a brand manager at a friend of the family's company. What she actually did was curate an Instagram life. 200,000 followers, 3 Dubai trips per year, and one personal rule she had never once broken. She did not associate with people she considered beneath her. Period. When the new driver was introduced to her on a Monday morning, she barely looked up from her phone. "Mommy, what's his name again?" "His name is Emma," her mother said. Chinedu had not used his real name. "He'll be driving you to your office and your appointments." Folashade glanced at him for 2 seconds. Plain blue shirt, black trousers, cheap shoes, no watch. Then went back to her phone. "Emma, just don't be late. I hate late drivers." "Yes, Ma," Chinedu said quietly. And so it began. For the first 2 weeks, Chinedu suffered in ways he hadn't imagined. The boys' quarters had a tiny bed, a ceiling fan that rattled like a generator in its final days, and a bathroom shared with the gateman. He ate from a small plastic plate. He washed his own clothes by hand for the first time in his life. The soap was nearly gone before the shirt was even clean. The family cook, a warm, older woman everyone called Mama Kachi, took pity on him and showed him how to do it properly without laughing too much. But the hardest part was Folashade. She would shout at him for the smallest things. If traffic on the bridge made her 3 minutes late, she would scream. Why hadn't he taken a different route? If the AC wasn't cold enough the moment she got in, she'd call him stupid. One afternoon, she dropped her phone in the back seat and couldn't find it immediately. She accused him of stealing it. The phone was right there, underneath her own handbag. When she found it, she didn't apologize. She just rolled her eyes and said, "Drive." Chinedu, a man who had spent his entire life with people bowing when he walked into rooms, sat in that driver's seat with both hands on the steering wheel and learned something real. Learned it the way you can only learn it when there's no exit, no escape, no name to fall back on. He learned humility. But something else was happening in that compound. Something he hadn't expected. There was another girl there. Her name was Amarachi. Amarachi was Folashade's cousin. Her mother was Mr. Adekunle's younger sister, but life had treated that side of the family very differently. Amarachi's father had died when she was 12. Her mother had scraped and struggled to raise her. 2 years ago, when Amarachi finished her diploma in catering, Mr. Adekunle had brought her to live with the family to help in the kitchen. In exchange, he was supposed to be funding her part-time university studies. She was 23, not as tall as Folashade, not as light-skinned, no long braids. But there was something about her, a quality that's hard to put into words, something soft, something genuine. She had a quiet smile that moved slowly across her face like it meant something. She moved gently through spaces. And every single morning, she greeted everyone in that compound, from Mr. Adekunle himself, all the way down to the gateman. "Good morning, sir. Good afternoon, Ma. Brother Emma, how are you today? Have you eaten?" The first time Amarachi asked Chinedu if he'd eaten, with real concern in her voice, not politeness, actual concern, he nearly cried sitting in his car. Nobody had asked him that question in months. Slowly, he began to notice everything about her. He noticed how she woke at 5 in the morning to start breakfast for a family that treated her like furniture. He noticed how Folashade shouted at her constantly. "Amara, where's my smoothie? Amara, iron this dress. Amara, why is the rice cold?" And Amarachi would answer softly every time, "Yes, sister, sorry, sister," and go back to what she was doing without bitterness on her face. He noticed how, late in the evenings, after every dish was washed and every room was clean, she would sit on a small stool behind the kitchen with a textbook in her lap, reading by the light of a single bulb, studying for exams she was paying for herself because Mr. Adakunle kept saying the money was tight. He noticed that on Sunday mornings, when she had a few free hours, she walked to the small church down the road and came back with a smile that made the whole compound feel lighter. Then, one Saturday afternoon, something happened that settled it. Shinidu had driven Folashade to a salon in Victoria Island and was waiting outside in the heat, his stomach growling. He hadn't eaten since dawn. He bought a small loaf of bread from a street hawker and was eating it quietly behind the car when his cheap Nokia rang. It was Amarachi. "Brother Emma, where are you?" "With Sister Folashade at the salon." A brief pause. "Have you eaten?" "I'm managing." Another pause, shorter this time. "When you bring her home, come to the kitchen by the back. I cooked ofe akwu. I packed some for you, with pounded yam." That evening, sitting alone in the boys' quarters, eating that soup from foil paper, Chinidu Akonwo, the man who had dined in the finest restaurants in London and Paris, realized something that no restaurant had ever made him feel. This girl didn't know him. She had nothing whatsoever to gain from being kind to him. As far as she knew, he was a poor driver earning 50,000 naira a month. And yet she had remembered him. She had fed him. She had seen him as a human being worthy of being thought about. For the first time in years, something warm began to grow in his chest. In the weeks that followed, they started to talk. Small, careful conversations in the kitchen when no one else was around, or in the quiet evenings when she swept the compound. He learned that her dream was to open a small catering business one day, to feed people, especially children, because she still remembered what it felt like to go to school on an empty stomach. He learned that she sent half of her tiny monthly allowance back to her mother in the village every single month without fail. He learned that she had been crying quietly in her room 3 nights earlier because Mr. Adakunle had just told her he couldn't pay her school fees for the coming semester. Money was tight, he said, even though everyone in that compound knew perfectly well it was not. Chinedu wanted to give her money. He had millions sitting in accounts he wasn't allowed to touch. He had made himself a promise, and he kept it. Instead of money, he gave her his full attention. He listened. He made her laugh. He made her smile in ways that changed her whole face. And one evening, sitting on the back steps of the kitchen with 2 cups of tea between them, he asked her a question. "Amarachi, if a man came into your life, a poor man, just a driver with nothing, not even his own room, could you love that man?" She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she said, "Brother Emma, my mother taught me one thing. Money is not what makes a man. Character is what makes a man. If a man has a good heart, hard-working hands, and respect for God and people, that man is already rich. The money will come or it won't, but character you cannot buy." Chinedu's hands were shaking around his cup. Before he could say another word, the back door of the main house slammed open. Folashade's voice tore through the night air. "Amara! Amara, where are you? You useless girl! Are you out here flirting with the driver again?" Amarachi jumped up like she'd been burned. "Coming, sister, coming!" She ran inside. Chinedu sat alone in the dark for a long time. His heart was pounding. He had made a decision. The next morning he counted his savings, 15,000 naira from 3 months of driver's salary, and bought a bouquet of roses from a roadside hawker. Simple flowers wrapped in old newspaper. His plan was straightforward and completely terrifying. Find Amarachi when she came outside, hand her the flowers and say, "I like you. I am a poor man, yes, but my heart belongs to you. Will you let me try?" That was the plan. Fate had other ideas. He stepped out of the boys' quarters with the roses in his hand and walked directly into Folashade, who had just returned from the gym, sweaty and in a foul mood. She saw the flowers. Her eyes lit up, not with warmth, but with the specific amusement of someone who has just spotted something ridiculous. "Emma, are those for me?" Ma, no. These are... But Folashade was already smiling and walking toward him, because in her mind, the only possible explanation was that this driver had developed a crush on her, had been quietly admiring her for months. The idea didn't flatter her, it amused her, and she wanted entertainment. "Are you proposing to me, Emma?" she said loudly. Her two friends who had pulled up to collect her began to giggle from the car. "Oh my God, the driver is proposing!" The gateman was watching. The cook was watching from the kitchen doorway. Mr. and Mrs. Adekunle had come outside to see what was happening, and at the kitchen window, Amarachi stood watching with wide eyes. Chinidu looked at Folashade. Then he looked at Amarachi's face in the window, and something in him made a decision that had been building for weeks. He looked Folashade dead in the eye. "No, sister, these flowers are not for you. They are for Amarachi." The compound went completely silent. You could hear traffic from the road outside. Then Folashade laughed. A loud, ugly, theatrical laugh. "Amarachi, my house help cousin, you want to give flowers to Amarachi?" She turned to her parents. "Daddy, are you hearing this? The driver and the kitchen girl, this is a whole movie." She turned back to him, and the laughter drained out of her face. What replaced it was contempt so pure it had no performance in it at all. "Let me tell you something, Emma. Whether the flowers are for me or for Amarachi, hear me clearly. In this house, drivers do not date anybody. You are a poor man. Your salary is 50,000 naira. You smell of sweat. You cannot even afford data on your phone. How dare you bring flowers into this compound?" She grabbed the bouquet from his hand. "Get out of my face before I call security." She threw the roses on the ground. Then she stepped on them, slowly, methodically, in her gym sneakers. Crushed every petal, scattered them across the dirty floor. Mr. Adekunle stood there and said nothing. Mrs. Adekunle looked away. Only Amarachi at the kitchen window had tears streaming silently down her face. Chinidu's chest was on fire, but he did not shout, did not curse. He looked at Folashade with eyes she didn't understand, calm, almost pitying, and said softly, "Okay, sister, okay." He turned and walked to the boys' quarters. He packed his small bag. By evening, he was gone. Folashade laughed about it for the rest of the day. Her friends posted videos mocking it. "Driver caught feelings, LOL." The comments were full of people laughing along. 3 days later, a black Range Rover with tinted glass pulled up at the Adekunle gate early on a Friday morning. 2 bodyguards stepped out first. Then a tall, immaculately dressed older man in a perfect agbada emerged, holding a black file folder under his arm. Chief Bartholomew Akonwo. The gate man didn't recognize him immediately. Then he looked closer, and his legs began to shake. This face had been on the covers of magazines, on television, in newspapers. The gate man ran for Mr. Adekunle. Mr. Adekunle came out adjusting his shirt, confused and slightly frantic. Then he saw who was standing at his gate, and his mouth opened with no sound coming out. "Chief Akonwo, sir, to what do we owe this honor?" "Please call your wife," Chief Bartholomew said, his voice deep and unhurried. "Call your daughter. Call everyone in this house. We need to talk." Within 10 minutes, the entire household was assembled in the living room. Folashade came downstairs in her pajamas, still half asleep, rolling her eyes at being disturbed. Amarachi stood near the kitchen doorway, her hands trembling, having no idea why a man of this stature was sitting in their parlor. Mr. and Mrs. Adekunle sat upright and stiff as boards. Chief Bartholomew looked slowly around the room. Then he asked one question. "Where is the driver you employed 3 months ago? The young man called Emma?" Mr. Adekunle's expression shifted. "Sir, Emma left 3 days ago. Why do you ask?" "Because Emma is not his name." Chief Bartholomew's voice was perfectly level. "His name is Chinidu Akonwo. He is my son." The room detonated. Mrs. Adekunle screamed. Mr. Adekunle stood up, sat down, stood up again, as though his legs couldn't decide. Folashade dropped her phone straight to the marble floor. The screen cracked across. She didn't even look at it. The color had drained from her face completely. Your son, she whispered. The driver. The one with the cheap shoes. My only son, Chief Bartholomew said quietly. The heir to Akonwo Holdings. The young man whose flowers you crushed into the ground 3 days ago. Folashade began to shake. Chief Bartholomew opened the black file. Mr. Adekunle, as you know, your bank holds a credit facility with Akonwo Holdings, valued at 3.8 billion naira. As of this morning, I have called in that loan. Full repayment within 30 days. He turned a page. I have also instructed my lawyers to terminate all consulting and contracting agreements between any Akonwo subsidiary and any business connected to your family, effective immediately. Mr. Adekunle's face went the color of old paper. Sir, please. Whatever my daughter did, I beg you. We didn't know. We didn't know, sir, please. You did not need to know, Chief Bartholomew said. And now his voice carried something heavier than anger, a quiet, settled grief. Your daughter humiliated a man she believed was poor, simply because she believed he was poor. Whether he was my son or not is beside the point. No human being deserves what she did. You raised her. You watched her become this. You stood in that compound and said nothing. He turned and looked directly at Folashade, who had folded herself onto the floor, crying, knees on marble. You did not know who he was. Exactly. You did not know. And so you treated him like something to be scraped off your shoe. So tell me, if a person's value to you depends entirely on what they have, what does that say about your own value? What kind of human being are you? Folashade had no answer. There was nothing left in her to say. Then Chief Bartholomew turned. His eyes moved around the room slowly until they found the young woman standing quietly by the kitchen door, her hands clasped, her face afraid. Are you Amarachi? She nodded. She could barely breathe. The old man's expression changed completely. He walked to her slowly, and when he reached her, his voice was gentle, the way a man speaks to someone he already respects. My daughter, my son told me about you. He told me how you treated him when you thought he had nothing. He told me you fed him. You spoke to him with kindness. You saw him as a human being, not as a position, not as a bank balance, just a man. He took her hand carefully in both of his. My son loves you, Amarachi. He has been a wreck for 3 days, refusing to eat, barely sleeping. He's sitting in the car outside right now, too afraid to come in because he believes you'll be angry that he lied about who he was. Tears were pouring down Amarachi's face. Will you go and see him? She nodded. She walked out of that room, past Folashade kneeling on the floor, past Mr. and Mrs. Adekunle, who could not meet her eyes, through the gate and out onto the road. And there, leaning against the side of the black Range Rover in a simple white shirt and dark trousers, was Chinidu. His eyes were red. He looked at her the way a person looks at the one thing they're most afraid of losing. Amarachi, I'm sorry. I lied to you about who I was, but everything I felt was real. Every word, every conversation, every cup of tea. I just wanted to find someone who would love me when I had nothing. And you loved me when I had nothing. She didn't say a word. She walked into his arms, and they held each other on the side of that road while Lagos moved around them. 6 months later, Chinidu and Amarachi were married. The wedding was small and warm, just family in the village. Chief Bartholomew sponsored Amarachi's mother to relocate from the village into a comfortable home in Enugu. Amarachi opened her catering company in Lagos, and within 2 years, she was feeding events of 2,000 guests with a staff of 40 people. She also launched a school feeding program for children across 3 states because she still remembered what it felt like to learn on an empty stomach. As for Folashade, Mr. Adekunle lost his position at the bank within a month of Chief Bartholomew's visit. The family sold 2 houses, The white Mercedes was repossessed. The followers who had laughed along at the driver caught feelings video disappeared the moment the full story spread through Lagos.